According to the National Council of Nonprofits, the average grant proposal has about a 10 to 20% success rate. So today we're going to talk about 3 key pieces that nonprofits can implement to have a higher grant success rate.
Awesome. The first thing that we want to do is number one, focus on ideal funders. Second thing, be very explicit about what the programs are going to do, but what their funding is going to do. The third thing that we want to do is we want to think like a long-term partner. And now we want to talk about each one of those specifically. First things first, Lauren, why should nonprofit leaders focus on ideal funders first?
We see a lot of nonprofit organizations that we talk to and get to work with at Social Impact Solutions. And so, as you know, our team sees a lot of organizations that really try and chase any type of funding. They try and get funding from individual donors, from granting organizations, private foundations, corporate partners, and lots of other types of funding too, if and where it exists. And so I believe one of the most effective exercises that we go through with our clients is focusing on an ideal funder profile type, determining who their ideal funders are, how they can communicate their impact to those funders, and where they can find more funders that fit within that category. This isn't just our opinion. Bridgespan, which is an amazing organization, has done a multi-year study that they just updated last year that shows that's how large nonprofits have successfully grown and scaled, is by concentrating on their ideal funder type. And so that is a quick overview of the importance of ideal funders, not to spread your development team too thin, but to really focus on what actually works for your particular organization. And if that's grants, then by all means apply for more grants that fit within your wheelhouse that align with your mission. But what would your insights be for ideal funder types, John Mark?
Absolutely. I think it's such a great thing that the vast majority of nonprofit leaders that we've worked with, this is new information for them. They always hear the idea that you need to diversify your funding. And that is not good advice for organizations that are trying to grow. It's fine advice for large organizations that want to stay big, but it is not good advice for organizations that are actually trying to grow and scale their fundraising. You do not want to diversify your donor base. You want to duplicate your ideal donors. We've done I don't know how many ideal funder profiles for nonprofits over the years, and we've helped organizations, double their revenue, triple their revenue in 1 year's time, just by scaling and focusing on ideal funders. And so definitely start there. If you want to increase your grant writing success, to be even more specific, focus on aligned funders there too. If you are more successful with like a CSR, corporate foundation, focus on more corporate foundations. It's a different game than government contracts. If you're great at government contracts, go do more government contracts. If you're great at family foundations, go do more family foundations, because they're very different strategies. It might be the same channel of grant writing, but it's a very different offering. It's a very different conversation. It's a very different engagement overall. So duplicate your ideal donors. The second piece is we want to be explicit in our grant proposals what the funding will accomplish. Lauren, I think you can speak to this marvelously. Tell us why that's so important.
I think it's absolutely critical for, from the funders review, they're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of applications, and they're wanting to understand, how is this a partnership? How are we making at least a social investment? What's the social return on investment? If we give this organization 10,000, 100,000, however much money the grant is going to be worth. But I would back up a little bit, and I've reviewed a lot of grant applications lately, and oftentimes it's not very clear what the program or project or initiative budget is. And I think that's a major yellow, if not red flag, when a funder is reviewing an application. If it's not clear what funding is needed, then it's absolutely very hard to understand what that funding is going to do, what change is going to be created as a result of that funding being provided. And so it has been very frequent in the last 3 to 4 months, reviewing applications for some of our clients. And there's, maybe a high level bullet point outline for a project or initiative or program budget, but that has to be really clear. What's the funding need in order to understand what the funds are actually going to lead to? And so that would be my biggest priority is make it clear, make sure internally it's very clear what you need the funding for, rather than just assuming that any amount of funding is going to help you move the needle Funders can typically very clearly see when things aren't clearly understood internally, and that does not give them confidence in supporting your organization or that particular program or initiative. What are your thoughts on that, John Mark?
When you see that the statistic that you said at the beginning, that 10 to 20% of grant proposals are accepted, there's reasons why it's so low. A 10%, success rate is extraordinarily low. And put yourself in the funder's shoes. They get thousands of applications. Many of them get thousands of applications. And if they're reading something that says, I have no idea what difference the money that I'm responsible for donating is going to make, you're going to be one of the first to be thrown out the door, right? And so you might think, is it worth doing all of this work? Absolutely. If you can take your average grant success from 10% to 20%, doubling the success rate, definitely worth the investment there. Or more if you can get it to 30%, which would be much, much healthier for your organization. We have a client that has an 80% success rate. That was before we even started working with them. Now, they weren't applying for very many grants, and they had great relationships with the grantors, but they were definitely going above and beyond when it came to, this is the difference that your money is going to make when you give to this specific program. And that makes all of the difference, right? This is the difference that it's going to make. The third thing, and this goes very nicely with number 2, is that you really need to think like a long-term partner. So many nonprofit leaders find themselves desperate for fundraising. And that's very easy to pick up on. And when you're applying for, a $50,000 grant, $250,000 grant, a $5,000 grant, and they're all very scattered and not very aligned. And you can you can feel the sense of urgency, whether it's real or perceived, and what's coming across there. But you want to think, I don't just want to win this $5,000 grant or $50,000 grant or $500,000 grant this year. I want to establish a long-term partnership and have this funder for the next 25 plus years. Like, that's the kind of relationship that you want. And you might come back and say, oh, well, so many of the grants say like this is a one-time funding thing. That is very often not the case, right? It is very often they're just trying to filter for effective nonprofits that they can partner with on the long term. And so I want to encourage you to think more long-term with these funders and with that relationship so that you can have those multi-year engagements with funders. But Lauren, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that everyone knows, even though it's not always practiced or implemented, the relational component is huge, right? So whether that's, we applied last year and didn't get it, but we reapplied this year and we did, or we, haven't even applied yet, but we've taken time to have conversations and get to know various program officers or a connection at that particular foundation or funding institution. So the relational component is huge. And then also just making sure that that both missions are aligned. The mission of the funding institution is very much aligned with the mission of your organization. And by that, I'm not really saying, if you're in healthcare, avoid educational funders. That's not necessarily the case. But we see a lot of organizations that, again, are wanting to apply for as much funding as possible. And so if they're in the nonprofit ag industry, then they might be applying for anything that mentions farmers, ag, so on and so forth. But making sure that you're truly mission aligned, because that sounds very simple, but don't waste your time on applications when their exclusion criteria very clearly excludes your organization, your program, or, even if you're questioning, I'm not sure, reach out to them before, you take the time to submit a full application or even a letter of intent. And so those would be, I know that sounds simple, but it's things that we see organizations do all the time, just in an attempt to get any amount of funding. Make it worthwhile and make sure that you're interested in them just as much as they're interested in you.
Absolutely. So I think those are really good 3 points that we have here. Number 1, focus on ideal funders. Don't just go after everyone with a pulse and a credit card, right? That's not what we want to do. We want to go after ideal funders. The second thing is we want to be explicit on what their funding is going to do, what the impact will be created through the program. And then thirdly, we want to think like a long-term partner. If you're interested in improving your grant writing success, if you're interested in scaling your nonprofit's impact as well as your fundraising, I recommend that you go to our website, socialimpactsolutions.com. You can schedule a discovery call with one of our team members to find out the most effective way that you can scale your impact as well as increase more funding. If you're also interested in learning from just more of like a distance, quick assessment for your organization on where you can focus your energies most effectively now, go to fundraisingquiz.org to take our free fundraising assessment. You're actually going to be assessed on your fundraising, your marketing, your impact measurement, your organizational clarity, and even your technology stack to find what would be the best thing for you to focus on right now to take your organization to the next level. But I really appreciate everyone watching this video, and Lauren, thank you so much for your time with this.
Thanks so much.